Welcome, everyone, to DEI After 5, the show that focuses on topics across diversity, equity, and inclusion with some of the brightest minds in the industry. Here's your hostess, inclusive culture curator and coach, Sacha Thompson.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of DEI After 5. So the more I do this work, and actually when I think back to when I was in corporate as an employee, I thought that it was very important, or I saw that it was very important that my manager, the leaders in the organization were really bought into diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I could tell that for many of them, it was so difficult for them to kind of wrap their brains around, while for others, maybe because of their identities or the lives that they lived outside of work, it was a little easier for them to get bought into what we were trying to do or what the organization was trying to do. And so this conversation today really is going to be about leadership and the importance of leadership in not only talking the talk, but how do they walk the walk when it comes to pushing diversity, equity, and inclusion, belonging forward as we continue to try to make the workplace more equitable and inclusive for everyone. And so my guest today is none other than Tara Jaye Frank, one of the voices in this work that has been doing it for quite some time. She is a consultant and author, just all of the things. I absolutely love everything that she touches. So Tara, I want to welcome you to the show.
Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited. If I'm being honest, I've been watching you have shows with all these other people I love and admire, and I'm like, my turn. So here we are.
We're here. Great. So for those of you who for those that have not been following you or know about you and your work, can you just tell us a little bit about you and how you got into doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work?
Yes, absolutely. I will try to do this succinctly, but I have been adjacent to diversity, equity, and inclusion, leadership, talent, multicultural marketing, right? All of that pretty much since the beginning of my career. But I'll say maybe 20 years proper. I spent 21 years at Hallmark Cards. I became a leader at 25. So appreciating being able to lead all people well is something that I've been doing for a long time. But then I was working on culturally specific products like Mahogany and Tree of Life, et cetera. And then worked in business innovation, designed and stood up a multicultural center of excellence, and then served as corporate culture advisor to the president and CEO before I resigned to start my own firm. I now just focus really heavily, right, on helping C-suite leaders imagine the future culture they want to have, really genuinely assess the one they have today, and build a bridge between those 2 points. And for me, part of that is really leading in a way that makes room for everyone, recognizes everyone's talents and contributions, rewards people appropriately, and essentially makes a way.
I love it. And what I appreciate, and there have been quite a few folks that have been a part of the show that come from a product or, marketing standpoint in doing this work. And so I'm a huge, supporter of it doesn't always have to come out of HR. And many of the folks that I've talked to, including yourself, it warms my heart to see people coming from other parts of the discipline, because that, I think, is such a critical lens to have as you're doing this work, right? So you said you came from, Hallmark, doing those types of products that were culturally specific. And so how does that impact how you approach your work now?
Yeah, this is a great question. I was actually talking to somebody about this a couple days ago. I worked on culturally specific product, but I worked on all the product as well, right? Everyday card season, I have done it all. And the heart of my work at Hallmark was really about relationships. I started my career as a greeting card writer, So,
Mm.
we like to think of ourselves as pseudo psychologists, which means from a very young age, it was my job to deeply understand human motivation and behavior, to deeply understand what kinds of words, ideas, commitments bring people together, right? In genuine relationship, and the things that also sometimes tear them apart. And then to go further, those that mend wounds, right? That heal wounds, that mend fences. So the heart of my work at Hallmark was really about people and connection and relationships. And as well as I, that is such a critical part of the work we do today. I still believe that relationships are the great accelerator, which is why I wrote the book that I wrote.
Absolutely. And as someone who appreciates greeting cards and it take way too long and picking one out, I appreciate that because it's so true. And I never thought of it the way that you just laid it out. And yes, it's about relationships, but it's how do you convey the right messaging so that it creates this action for people to do, right? So not just buy the card, but like, yes, this conveys exactly what I want to say and the sentiment of what I want to communicate. And that is kind of what DEI work is about. Like, how are you getting to the heart of what it means to be quote unquote marginalized, right? What are the voices that need to be heard or seen or recognized, and doing so in a way that people get it and people want to go ahead.
No, I always thought about greeting cards as emotional springboards. That's the way, when I was kind of leading strategy, because I started as a writer, but then my last role in creative was vice president of creative writing and editorial. So all the word people reported up through me in my organization. And I used to just think about that particular vehicle as an emotional springboard. It was not going to get the relationship job done, but it could certainly get the connection job started. And help people get a little bit further along the way. And isn't that true of our work, Sacha?
Absolutely.
Right? We don't go into organizations and solve world hunger, but if we can help people think differently about their existing relationships, if we can help them get down the road just a little bit, right? Get more comfortable with having the kinds of conversations they need to have and collaborating to solve them, then we can give them the tools they need to keep that work going.
Yeah. Let's, talk about transition. Like that's how you make the way. So, talk about how I did that there. Let's talk about like this book and the Waymakers, because if I remember correctly, you have been starting to put out some work around this before you did the book, and just talking about the role of leaders in creating avenues of change and creating ways for this work to be done, and not being, it's almost the opposite of gatekeeper, right? And so can you talk to us a little bit about what is a Waymaker and what role do you see them playing in this work?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So if you don't mind, I'll back up just a little bit and say
Okay.
that you are absolutely correct. My work has always really been about leadership. I didn't intend when I started my consultancy to become known for equity and inclusion work per se, right? I started it as a leadership consultancy. But I realized as I was trying to help, Black and Brown people and women further enhance their leadership capacity, that that wasn't really the biggest issue. That I could develop or help develop the vine till I was blue in the face. But if the vineyard was dry, the vine would not thrive. So this idea of instead kind of flipping that paradigm for myself and for companies and saying, no, I need to help the company leaders, right, cultivate the kinds of environments where we can be successful. So for me, that was a little bit of the flip. And the Waymakers came about because as I started thinking through all the Black and Brown people, for instance, it's certainly not a problem or challenge just for us, but all the Black and Brown people I knew who had risen to greater levels of contribution and got to the top of their game, however they define that, did so not only because they were experienced and brilliant and, had that aspiration, but also because someone made a way for them.
Right.
Someone opened the door, right? Removed the barrier, ushered them through, right? Put them on that really important project, got them in that really important room. And those are the kinds of actions leaders take that make things possible for us. So I realized that what I really want to do with my work is create, right? Is inspire and equip, if you will, more Waymakers, because that's the secret sauce. The systems matter. No one in this work would ever say they don't, but the people matter more sometimes, right? And people implement systems, people interpret systems. So if we don't get this work in the hearts and minds and hands of people, of leaders, those systems will still, keep looking good or bad and not necessarily really change.
What I appreciate about what you just said was it's almost that next level of sponsorship, right? Where we hear so much about mentorship and sponsorship and, sponsors open doors, but a Waymaker is not just opening the door. Like they are creating a path. It's much more actionable. It's much more action oriented. Because it's not passive, right? In order to be a Waymaker, you have to be very intentional in what you want the end result to be. And so even to your point just now around systems, Waymakers can change the systems, right? They have the ability to do that. And so I love the framing of how do you make a way, right? And it goes beyond checking a box, which I think so many people are just tell me what to do and I'll do that one thing and I'm done.
And this, I mean, a lot of people have been looking for the formula, right? Like I won't forget. I mean, a few years ago, I was going into some companies and they were literally asking me for the list of things to say and not say. And you're trying to help people understand that's not at all what any of this is about. And no one is ever going to be able to give you as comprehensive a list as you want. Right. Because circumstances are always changing. People are always changing. Folks are individuals. Like that's not a success strategy for you at all. And I love the way you talk about Waymaking being active, because that's really what I was trying to get at. Like the idea of allyship is something I support. Clearly, it matters. But I think the more we talk about it, even that concept, I believe, people are looking at it more these days, in some cases, as a cheerleader or as an encourager or as someone who seeks to understand your situation. But I can understand you and cheer you on and encourage you and not get my hands dirty at all.
That part.
And Waymakers get their hands dirty.
Yes.
Right? Waymakers don't only seek to understand what's in your way, but they sometimes go before you to move it so that you can keep moving.
I love that. I absolutely love it. Because ally and allyship has become one of those terms that I just don't care for, because it becomes like this badge of honor, right? Mm-hmm. I'm an ally. You can't call yourself an ally because it's about action. What are you doing that's actionable that others will call you an ally, right? It's not something that's self-appointed. And then what aligns exactly with what you're saying is, what are you willing to risk in that process? Because if you're just calling yourself an ally and standing on the sidelines, then are you really an ally? And so I love how you said, with a Waymaker, they will sometimes go first to clear the way so that path is uninhibited. And there's so many leaders that I think are willing to do that, but don't necessarily know that that's what they need to do.
Right. It's, this is the part that I get most excited about. So when I thought about, writing this book, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just writing a theoretical book, right? Mm-hmm. That I wasn't just saying, this is what Waymaking is, and this is why it's important. but that I also started to solve the problem. And the problem, as I have identified it in, being in all these companies over these years, is that even when people want to make a way, they often don't know exactly how, or they feel insecure about doing it, right? It's a hard thing to get wrong. When the stakes are high emotionally, professionally, people tend to kind of hesitate and they sit on the fence. They're watching like, yeah, it feels like a good idea, but people need to not only be inspired to get off the fence, they need to be equipped in order to get off the fence. And they need encouragement. They need to build confidence, right? Like, not only can you do this, right, but you already do it in some parts of your life. Here's how to translate that. Here are some tools for you, some strategies, etc. So that's what the book was intended to be. It's an invitation, but it's also a little bit of a field guide.
I love it. And part of the process of learning and growing is getting dirty. It's making mistakes, and it's learning from, we do that with children, right?
Right.
Okay, fall, you get up. You didn't die in that process, whatever it is, like there was a lesson learned. What did you learn from it? And so as adults, we have this fear of messing up, particularly the higher you are in an organization. And so what are some of the places and spaces that you can mess up, but also give yourself grace to do so? And what resources do you need to have around you in order to kind of help you navigate, that whole process? So I love and I appreciate that. And I think the more and more I do this work, especially talking about inclusive leadership, the more I see that more leaders did not want to do the right thing. And so a field guide to help them do that is so critical in this conversation, because none of this work will happen if they aren't on board.
That's the bottom line, right? Like I tell people all the time, this is your work. This is about leadership, and it is your work. And if you do not do it, it will not happen. I often kind of talk about, in the book, I talk about the tipping point theory, essentially, or 20-60-20 principle. And any change you're trying to go through, you're always going to have about 20% on the front end, like, let's go, let's get it, let's make it happen. About 20% on the other end, like, don't touch my stuff. Right. And then most of the people in the middle who are like, again, observing, trying to figure out if they fit in, where they fit in, what exactly to do once they get off the fence and into the arena. And I really do believe that if we do not invest more in what I call the lagging group, right, which is the fence sitting group, if we don't invest more in them and help them become leaders, then two things will happen. One, we'll never get anywhere, which I think is indicative of what we've experienced in a lot of ways over the last several years. But the other thing that will happen is that 20% fixed group will continue to get louder and bolder, right? And just a little bit more prominent, right? We are seeing it, because what we're doing is we're not building our leading group with intention, right? We're not equipping people to lead. And to double down on that, we're focusing now on, how do we make the fixed group happy? How do we help the fixed group get more comfortable? I tell people all the time, I'm like, you are going to spend all your time trying to fix something that is unfixable. Some of these people do not want equity.
You're right.
Like, they don't want diversity. They do not want inclusion. And so you're asking me how to fix an unfixable problem. Focus instead, right, on amplifying your leaders and inspiring, equipping, and encouraging your laggers. To me, that's the only way we get anywhere.
Absolutely. Like, that's where you put your energy. And it's so fascinating to me, because what I am seeing too is a lot of the laggers aren't necessarily lagging because they want to be haters, like, just to put it that way. Many of them just are not fully aware of what all of it means. And so I'm not going to sign up for something that I don't understand.
Right.
Right. So again, it's how are you communicating this? Who's communicating this? Who are the influencers within your organization that can be game changers as far as getting other folks on board and excited? And, you know, to your point, that 60%, how do you start to move and shift them so that they become the majority? And then it starts to shift the culture of the organization. You know, that's
one of the ways
go ahead.
Right. One of the ways I do that practically, right? Like we have these kind of interactive leadership capacity building sessions that we scale inside companies. And a lot of times the audience is this group that we're talking about right now. And the first thing I do in these groups is personalize it for them. So part of the challenge here is not only do they not really know what to expect or what's going to be required of them, they sometimes don't think it has anything to do with them, right? They're like, oh, okay, you want me to help all these people who are struggling. That's how they think about it, some of them, right? It's like this distant thing that is not attached to them. So one of the first things I do is really just ask them to think of a time they felt included. Right? Like think of a time you really felt part of the team. You felt like your ideas were being considered. You felt like your opinions were being respected. And then I asked them to tell me what leaders said and did, right? Because the Waymaking guidebook is really a whole lot about choices and behaviors. What did the leaders say and do to make you feel that way? They have no problem answering these questions. Everything comes up immediately. They are crystal clear. And most of their answers are similar or at least adjacent. So as soon as they understand that this work is not foreign, that this work is not disconnected from them, that they have experienced it, it's easier for me to say, we're just trying to create that experience for everyone in your workplace. And that's not true today. And here are some of the reasons why.
I love it.
So personalizing it and helping them understand their role in it is really kind of step one for me, right?
Yeah. I actually had that same example yesterday with someone where we were talking about psychological safety and that first stage being inclusion safety. And I said, you know, the first question is always, tell me about a time when you felt excluded. And it doesn't have to be at work. And oftentimes people talk about something that happened in childhood. And so it's like, okay, well, how did that make you feel? What did you need in that moment, right? You needed an adult to speak up, or you wanted your friend to say something. So then we do a shift to, okay, well, what does this look like in the workplace?
Right.
Right. And so again, it's that personal connection, because like now I'm in my feelings, I'm getting out of my head, I'm getting into my heart. I remember what that felt like. And if people are feeling like that in the workplace, what can I do to help shift that? So I love that you use that, because it's effective. It's very effective. And again, it gets people out of this very logical head, not emotion, because we also have to get out of this whole thing of, you know, we're supposed to leave our emotions at the door. For humans, like we can't do that.
Yeah.
Especially if people are saying to bring our whole selves to work. I'm an emotional
and this technique you and I are talking about is even more important now, because the reality is when people call me and say, what do I do about the white men in my organization, for instance, who feel left out? Part of my answer is they've been left out of the inclusion conversation. They feel left out because they are left out of the inclusion conversation, meaning they really believe it has nothing to do with them. We have not, when I say we, I'm not talking about clearly every DEI practitioner. I'm not talking about every company, every HR department. But as a rule, we have talked about equity and inclusion work, and we have talked about solving it as though it is not for them. And it is for them. It benefits them as well. And we also need their engagement to create workplaces where every single person has an opportunity to thrive. So part of the healing we have to do is understanding that we've inadvertently created this separation between them and the work we're trying to do. And we have to now build that bridge between those 2 points. That's not for people who just are racist and, want to be haters. That's a different issue.
Right.
But it's for those who just feel like this doesn't benefit me at all, because it's not true. It does.
Yeah. And it's really looking at, does everyone feel valued, seen, heard, and connected?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're thinking about these efforts, are they unintentionally excluding people? Right. And so again, it runs counter to what this work is about. I absolutely 100% agree with you on that. So what is one of the low-hanging fruit ways that someone can become a waymaker, right? Like they're interested, they're thinking about it. Like what's something that they can easily do tomorrow that can start this ball rolling for them?
So good question. Quick frame. I talk about the waymaking path or clearing the path as realism, responsibility, and relationship. Realism is embrace what is true about your employees' experiences. Responsibility is understand that you have a role to play. And relationship is where I'll kind of give you your low-hanging fruit tip.
Mm-hmm.
Relationship, again, is still the great accelerator. When we can build relationships with people who are not like us, right? It broadens our horizons, obviously, our perspectives on others.
Mm-hmm.
It helps us understand that each person is an individual, that we cannot paint an entire group of people with a broad brush. When we know more about someone else's aspirations and skills and talents and, results, then we are in a position to better make a way for them. If I know, if I get to know you, Sacha, let's just say we were not both Black women sitting here. If I got to know you personally, then I'm going to uncover common ground. And that affinity is going to make me want to help you. But if I also learn about your skills and results and aspirations, those two things together give anyone the greatest advantage. High affinity combined with high evidence of your contribution is how you give people the best advantage, right? So I would say get to know people on your team or who work with you who are not like you, both personally and professionally, and it does wonders.
I love that. And part of, what I would add almost to that is not assuming that people need what we needed. Right. And I find that a lot of leaders do that. When I was at that point in my career, I needed X, Y, and Z. And so that's what I'm going to give. That might not be what they need. And so, one of those questions that I always ask people, leaders, to ask their teams or individuals on their teams is, what do you need from me in order to be successful?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I feel like we went to the same unofficial school. I ask that all the time. Yes. I just asked my team that. We did our performance reviews, and that is exactly what I asked too. It's such a good question.
It's such a good question, but it also kind of gets us out of our own way to hear things that we probably didn't even think about or consider or know was even an issue or a challenge. Right. So it goes back to what you were saying about those relationships. If you're building those relationships and you're building that trust, people will then be more likely to share those things of, I'm really struggling with X, Y, and Z, or, this person I aren't seeing eye to eye. Do you have advice? They're more willing and apt to share that type of information if that relationship is there.
Yeah. And another quick tip that I share in the book is ask people who report to you, what can I do differently to better enable the team? So asking someone, how am I doing, is a risky proposition because nobody wants to say poorly.
Right.
But if you say, what can I do differently? You're already putting the stake in the ground that I recognize there's something I could be doing better, right? You're saying it instead of making them say it. So it's kind of connected to the example we just talked about, but just a little bit of a half twist.
Right. I love it. I love it. So Tara, if people wanted, actually, no, before I even go into that, I'm gonna ask this question.
Okay.
How do you fill your cup? What do you do to take care of yourself as you're doing this work?
Yeah, this is, it changes honestly every year. I will tell you that at the turn of this year, I decided that I wanted to embrace the ease that is available to me.
Mm,
I have learned that I tend to make things complicated for myself, meaning I feel like I need to be working all the time. Like there's something I'm not doing that I need to get done. And last year was that way for me, and it wore me slick.
mm,
So this year, when there isn't anything on fire, then I'm allowing myself to rest during that time, right? When I've checked the boxes and the tasks have been completed, I'm allowing myself to just be like, well, I know it's only 1:30, but there's nothing else that's really due right now. So I'm gonna go do this with my family member, or go read a book or something like that. So embracing the ease, right? Accepting that ease that is available
mm.
to me is something that I've never really been good at, but I'm practicing right now, and it's doing wonders.
I love that. I tell you, we might be just kismet spirits, or
Mm-hmm.
because
I feel that way. I feel
oh
it.
my goodness. Earlier today, I had a little bit of a break in between calls, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna play Pet Saga right here in my chair and just space out for a moment. And it was so good for
Yes.
me to be able to do that. And I think it's important that we take that time, as needed, because when those times, that crunch time is here and we're just constantly going, we're always wishing for, oh, I wish I had more time to do. And then when we do, we don't.
Yes. Oh, think about it. Like work life is usually like this.
Yeah.
And I think we are conditioned when it's like this to like force it back up there.
Oh yeah. No.
Like, oh, that doesn't seem right. Let me just keep doing stuff so I can ratchet it up. And
Nope.
that's not sustainable, right? Like then we hit a wall, we get sick over Christmas or the holiday. It's a mess. So when that comes down like this, I'm just trying to hang out there. So far so good. Check in with me though in about 6 months.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So Tara, how could people get in contact with you if they wanted to follow up with you, find your book, all the things?
Yeah, thank you. So they can find me at tarajayfrank.com. We're also at wearethewaymakers.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn. It's a good place to hang out with me, and see what I have to say, my thought of the day, if you will. The book is available everywhere online that books are sold. So if you literally just put in The Waymakers, you will get more results than you want or need. And there are a lot of places to buy the book there. We also have the audiobook is available on both Apple and Audible, and the ebook is out there too. So hard to miss me if you look.
I love it. I love it. Put it all in all the places, all the spaces.
All the places, all the things.
Tara, thank you so much for joining us today. I think that this is such a critical part of the conversation that a lot of organizations need to have, because we need to make some more waymakers for sure in order for this to be successful. So thank you so much for your work and all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you for your work, and thank you for having me and allowing me to connect with you in this space. It means a lot to me, and I just really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you all for joining us for this episode of DEI After 5. As always, you can find us every Tuesday at 5:15 on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, have a good one.